Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Thomas J. Bellezza, and welcome to another episode of The Right Mindset. Today's lesson is going to be about the art of discovery in writing, building emotional connections with your characters and the worlds. Ultimately, we're how to create a page turner. And some of the things we're going to go over today is how to get your readers to care about your characters and the world to make them keep going, examples of letting information breathe, and 3 quick tips to get your brain thinking about ways to keep your readers engaged. Let's do it. Hit that intro. All right. This is one of the newer playlists that I have created. One of the 9 new playlists that are being created for the channel. That's going to be over 18 playlists to choose from that focus on very specific things. And with that said, going into our second year, this is the first video of that second year playlist. If you're a beginner writer or advanced, if you're an author, a screenwriter, it doesn't matter. Click that subscribe button and make sure you tap that bell icon so you don't miss out. For anyone, if this is your first time, we talk about lessons focused on the craft. We analyze and review storytelling, and also there are interviews with fellow writers. All right, let's get right into it. Okay, so caring is sharing. What does that even mean? Let's do it. When we as readers care about characters, we want to know more about them. However, when we know too much, there is nothing to learn, or rather, discover. Discovering a character is how we as readers form emotional connections while we read a story. Our first introduction has to be subtle, but it also shouldn't be a secret. Basically, you want to let the character show who they are through their choices, how others see them, and the way they respond to conflict. Now, one other thing is the discovery is in the details of their past too. All right? And what this means is overall, too much or too little is going to take away the fun of what we learn. See, the more we learn about a character, the closer we are to them. And you have to keep in mind that the secret is to spread or let information breathe through the story. If I tell you that character A has a long list of expositions about their past and what they're working towards, etc., that part of the story will do one thing: take the reader out of the moment. It's just overwhelming. And we don't need to know all that information to really enjoy the story. The other element is we're not going to remember it. If you tell the world building of a character or the climate or the culture, and it's just this huge chunk of exposition in the beginning, by the time we get to chapter 10 or 12 or 15, we're not going to know it. But if you continue to slowly seed and breathe information throughout the book, we'll have an emotional connection to that past information while we're continuously not only being reminded, I apologize, but we're being educated into looking deeper into who they are, the world, etc. So allow it to breathe by taking your chunk of exposition that you've created and then spreading it out through your book until you have a good resolve or a payoff. In fact, you could do setup, payoff, setup, payoff, setup, payoff with information as well. But when you're world building to create page turning information, you need to allow that information to be discovered because we want to know more. But if you tell them everything, we'll know it, but we'll slowly forget it. Okay? Some of the best parts of growing a friendship, a relationship, a family ship is what happens through the learning process about each person through interaction. So think of your story in the same way. You're building a relationship with your reader as a writer, right? So, but if you sit there and let a person do everything in one sitting, you're more annoyed at them than not. If you just listen to someone go off, yeah, no, I come from here, I did this, I have that, my brother's this, my sister's that, I was married, I was this, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I have a job here, and I'm a writer. That's a lot of information. And the same goes for you if you choose to throw up your life's history on someone else you just met. But small moments lead to a long lasting connection. It's the little things in life that make great memories. And it's the same thing with your storytelling. Allow your storytelling to be about little small moments that create a much bigger moment or a big payoff moment from all the building of your seeding of this discovery information. Now, another element of sharing is caring, okay? Or more importantly, where is it? Caring is sharing. It's mirrored. All right. Is when the discovery of who they are comes from their soul through action. See, when they do things, when a character does things, we can relate to or respond with emotions to things that touch us. We follow the story through their emotional truths. Remember, who a person is comes through in how they respond to things, from conflict to choices to their own personal emotions. Why is this all a page turner? Why is this all a page turner? Because A, the reader wants to discover more about the characters for whom they have developed an emotional connection to. And B, this is why, traditionally, a book with the same protagonist sells well. Readers want to keep following the character they have an emotional connection to. So when you see series come out and you go, oh, I want to follow this character through each of these new books, it's because that emotional connection happened and we want to know more and more and more. Too much, too soon will take us out of that interest. Which brings me to the world says a lot. All right, the world says a lot. The world you create for your fantasy novel or fiction in general should be rich in detail and unique in nature. Readers will have the chance to be fascinated and intrigued by the unknown becoming known. If your world's history and mythology are well developed, your worlds are as much a character in your novels as your characters are in those novels. This is why you want to develop a connection between your readers and the worlds they are following a protagonist through. I will say this, oddly enough, this doesn't mean you should be spending years building the backworld, histories, and mythologies of your novels and the novels to come. Now, how you get around this and help your books become page turners is this. Let the history, mythology, and unique details be pertinent to the narrative itself. So real quick, instead of spending years, months, decades on building history, mythology, and all these other elements of your world, let your narrative actually be what creates that truth. You can do some research and brainstorming, and you could work on things, but there has to be a certain point where you create the boundary of saying, look, I got to stop and start writing. There's so much world building that can happen, but if you allow some world building to be a part of the back end while you're doing your work, your research, creating these ideas and brainstorming, allow your narrative to give you a sense of interest to those facts. The characters' choices and where they have to go will reflect not only the cultures, but the mythology and all the other things that make up history. It is better to allow your characters to be involved in that discovery of the history, mythology, cultures, etc., than it is to have all that information before you even get to writing, and then the majority of it you don't use. Because remember, whatever's in the story has to have purpose. It must be pertinent. Anyway, When world building is discovered for the benefit of characters and their journeys, it gives more weight to the world itself. When you tell the reader about the castle being built in 1522, 200 years before the novel takes place, only to realize that that information doesn't influence the overall narrative, you're going to pause the experience. The rule of thumb is this: when something is mentioned, Chekhov's gun suggests that it will pay off. If we hear that the castle is haunted before we get there, that castle better be haunted, or at minimum, it is discovered that the hauntings are fake. If the information exposed doesn't have a payoff or takes us away from the narrative in general, you might want to either A, figure out a way to make it relevant to the narrative, or B, take it out completely. To be fair, can you add information about the world that doesn't influence the narrative? Yes, you can. It's your story after all. You can do whatever you want. If you're going to go the route of an epic fantasy novel, it's still best to have the information exposed through the discovery of the characters. And what does that mean? Well, basically, don't stop the story to give a thesis on the history of trees, branches, and other elements of a religion when characters walk past, not through, but past the forest. Hey, like they just walk past and go, hey, look at that forest. Are we going over there? We are not going over there. Why? Because in 1977, during the first war of the there was a and a whole bunch of and do any of those names or dates have any value to the story? No. Then why do we need to know it? However, they could see the forest and go, why don't we just go through the forest? There's nothing good about that forest that we need to deal with. We have a time restraint and we have to get there this way. Now, by the way, we have a time restraint and we have to get there this way. Now you're creating information that needs to be challenged. What is the potential of slowing them down? Well, we have to see something slow them down, or at least the potential of something slowing them down, right? But you can mention the forest. You just don't go into greater detail because it's not important to the story, unless it does end up being important to the story. Now, if they are going to go through the forest, sure, the environment potentially garners interest in knowing the location more because you want to give life. You want to take away the white room element. So if they're going to go into the forest, you want to do a setup, you want to create the conflict, and there's going to be a resolution, so you got to have that. And then you have to allow to understand what their choices are going to be and then challenge those choices, right? Okay. Through discovery. I say this a lot, through discovery. Believe it or not, discovery is more than a method for writing as a pantser. Discovery is the secret to building an emotional connection between the reader and the narrative. Letting information breathe is how we create discovery from that information. If you have a need or a motivation for your characters or plot, think about how to break it up and let it breathe. I'll give you some examples. You want an example? I'll give you an example. If the motivation is to find a cure for the protagonist's child, or they will die, but finding the cure will most likely lead to the protagonist getting sick themselves because they have to get the cure by allowing the snake of Bloop Bloop to bite them and then using their own blood to be used as the curing elixir. Okay, yes, you can explain this entire premise in one sitting or pure exposition, or you can spread it out. Honestly, me just explaining it to you that way was probably a lot of information. But by spreading it out, we get to see how characters respond to the new information as they discover it and whether they do or do not do things based on it. So let's look at it in a different way. The first beat that you get is their child gets sick and they are not getting better. So explore that moment. Allow their child to be sick. We don't have to really go into how they got sick. You could do that, right? But you don't need someone to come in and explain the whole story. Focus, let that moment breathe. Their child is getting sick. How does it emotionally affect them? And they're not getting better no matter what they try. They spent all their money, or they got all the best healers in, or whatever the case may be, and the child is still sick. So what are we going to do? Well, finally, the second beat, doctors, they come in, and one doctor is like, listen, there's no cure for this. Your child is not going to make it. I think you should get a priest or a cleric or a druid or whatever, a rabbi to come in, and you got to say your goodbyes. And you let that moment breathe. And then the third beat comes in. It's revealed that a specialist priest or religious person deals with the unknown. So now you get to breathe on that. You get to discover that. Then you get the fourth beat. The protagonist goes there and is told that the cure is a process and that they will have to find the snake of bloop bloop. And you let that breathe. You talk about the snake of bloop bloop, and you talk about what the process is going to take to get to the snake of bloop bloop. But you don't have to go any further than that. And we've already had a chance to breathe with the moments beforehand. And by the way, this doesn't even have to be a main plot. This could be a subplot. But that's the power of breaking it up and spreading it out, is you give value. And through the main plot, this could be leaked in as a subplot. I'm doing this for the main plot, but this is something that I have to do. Now I'm going to continue to the last two beats. The fifth beat is they capture the snake, and they are told that the snake of bloop bloop has to bite them. And they can use the blood now as the cure. So you allow that to be something that goes through their mind, and they let it breathe. And then plot beat 6 happens, the final plot beat, and the protagonist agrees because it's their child. Now each discovered moment is telling of who the character is. The world building is happening with the religious element, with the snake, etc. How things heal. Oh, you could use, right? If all that was thrown at the reader in one sitting, now it's just information with no connection. And that's the beauty of spreading a part out. Imagine, again, the reader sits there and they go, oh, the child's sick. And they go, we're going to have to try to find some sort of cure. And the doctors are coming in, and they're like, none of the doctors are going to be able to do this. And, maybe we should just find a priest. And there has to be a priest that knows the situation. And, it turns out there's an elixir you could create if you go get it. You're like, come on. So when you think of exposition, write it all out as much as you want. Like, if you have a character just expose the whole premise of something, do that, let it out. But then look at that and say, is there a way I can show this through the narrative and break it up into beats? And in breaking up beats, can I show these scenes? Can I breathe on these beats? And then you'll find your stories becoming more rich and intriguing, and therefore turning those pages. And ultimately, this is how you show the world motivations and other elements of your characters instead of outright telling the audience about them. You can do this with main plots, subplots, character arcs, anything that is of note that you need to explain through exposition. You can create beats to that and spread it out throughout your story and let each beat breathe. So if I were you, I'd write out a paragraph, sort of like I just did with the first example, and then let the idea have a clear beginning, middle, and end with a conflict and a resolution. At which point, you can then figure out how you're going to tell that story over the course of your novel. And if it's a subplot, you'll learn where to put those beats based on how it's influenced by the main plot or that moment in general. And then character arcs, you can plot that out as well. All right. You've made it to the 3 quick bonuses. All right. Number one. Uno one. I need to drink something. Oh, God. Yeah, I needed that. Number 1, introduce high stakes and a sense of urgency. So earlier I said, they see the forest and they're like, we can't go that way. This is the quickest route. We have to go this way, and it's time sensitive. Right? That's a clear sense of urgency. It doesn't have to always be time sensitive. You could create other senses of urgency, like the child is going to die or whatever. Right? Your story should have a clear sense of urgency and high stakes that keep readers engaged and invested in the outcome. You don't always have to do that, but this is one thing you could do. Another is use foreshadowing and plot twists. So this is mixing seeding or discovery and then turning those seeds and discovery on their edge and on their side and saying, what we've been telling you is true, but there's something deeper. And what you thought it was going to be, it's something else that has earned the value of the information before. Like, you can't do a plot twist and then everything you've seeded up to that point means nothing. That's a cheap trick. Don't do that. Foreshadowing and plot twists can help readers guessing and keep them engaged, making your novel hard to put down, because I'm seeing something unfold and I'm interested. I want to see, do they accomplish A, B, and C? Number 3, use cliffhangers and chapter endings. I do not do this all the time, but ending chapters with cliffhangers or unexpected twists can keep readers engaged and eager to turn the page to see what's happening next. This is like the and he pulls the sword out of his Gerard the conqueror and looks up at the castle gates, because he's going to go into it. That's a cliffhanger, right? Or an unexpected twist is like here's a funny one that's based on something that I saw in real life. So in the story, it could be like two characters going. They go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, "I'm glad you came in. We just did a test on your, you're pregnant, and it's important that we did these tests. It turns out that you're the mother of your lover." And then that's the plot twist. Like, oh my God. And then the next chapter, you could start off with what? And now they have to discover what and the deal might turn out that the guy was actually put up for adoption when the mother was really young. And this was the adopted son that they ended up meeting. And there's an age gap, but they fell in love and they had a child together. And then they found out the worst thing you could possibly find out. That's a plot twist. All right. Not every plot twist, though, has to be dun, dun, dun. But I do recommend not overdoing it, because you'll take away from every element moving forward. They'll just be like, another one. Which brings me to my final thought. Final thoughts. Discovering a character is how we form emotional connections with reading a story. It's important to reveal their traits through their actions rather than their exposition. This is the key to building emotional connections between readers and the narrative. Sometimes you have to tell, like, for example, you don't have to explain to somebody that I am a mage of the 4th rankings. You don't have to do that. But if they're casting magic, right? And then they're like, we just fought a maid. How come you can't do what they do? They're 4th ranking. I don't have the skill to do what they do. And then you go, oh, all right. So now you learn that this character, there's a little bit of telling, but the showing is the magic. And then you see another character, and the characters experience a conflict where it's like, why can't you do what they're doing? And like, I can't. They're a higher ranking. And now there's rankings to it. Okay, I'm learning something now. But if you're like, hello, I am the mage of the 4th ranking. It's pretty high for me, but there are others out there that have spells that I can't use because they are higher rank. Like, you don't need to do that, but allow action and response and, call and response, things like that. Choices, conflicts, motivations, all these things should create the evidence, not exposition. But sometimes you have to do a little telling, like, hey, can you hear me? Are you able to breathe? I am unable to breathe. The character's saying it, so it's still, you're showing through the experience and the process of characters. But then, you have a character look up and go, we only have 20 minutes before he dies. We have to figure something out. Like, that's exposition, and that's telling. But you're setting stakes. All right. Just not the meat stakes. Hey-oh! Good jokes. All right. Discovery, whether of the characters or the world they live in, is a process that should be spread out in any narrative. Remember, too much, too little information can take away from the fun of what we learn as readers. I'll repeat that. Too much or too little information can take away from the fun of what we learn as readers. Because sometimes you're like, all right, that was too much. But other times you're like, that wasn't enough to get me to remember or care. So you have to find a nice, happy medium. And this is accomplished by letting information breathe and be relevant to the narrative. That relevant element is the emotional connection because you're invested in the story and that information is relevant to that narrative, and therefore it's more important to remember. But if it's a throwaway line just because you need them to know something, it's not relevant. When we care about characters, we want to know more about them, but the discovery should be in the details of their past and soul, revealed through their actions and responses to conflict. Remember, the world you create is as much a character as your protagonists, so make sure the history, mythology, and unique details are pertinent to the narrative. And the way to make it pertinent through the narrative is through the call and response reality of actions and responses to conflict, to truth, to moments, to conversation. How a character does or does not do something, say or does not say something, is going to allow us to sneak into that world. Just saying. Lastly, spread out the information and let the characters respond to it rather than giving it all out at once through exposition. And keep in mind that it's the little things in life that lead to the long-lasting connections. In closing, when in doubt, be vague but informative. I'll repeat that. When in doubt, be vague but informative. As you let information breathe through the story to let the readers learn from discovery. Vague but informative means you give just enough information to be informative, but not enough information where they know everything. Okay. Hey, next video in the series, we'll focus on coming up with book ideas, quick ways to think up a story, build on that idea, and get your brain moving. In that video, we'll talk about how to get your brain moving, what techniques to use to build on an idea, and we'll have some real-time examples that you can see me work out on the thing. Which brings us to questions. Have you ever faced writer's block? If so, how did you overcome it? Let me know in the comments below. It's just fun to kind of have discussions. Oh, by the way, if you like what you watched and have not done so already, please subscribe and hit that bell icon so you don't miss out. All right, that's it. I guess I'll see you next time. As always, keep developing the right mindset. Bye. Love you.